Hello everybody, this is Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-Minute Histories videos. And today I'm on Druid Hill Avenue in the Marble Hill historic neighborhood, and behind me is a building that's had several names, but still mostly goes by the name it started with, the home of the Friendless. That's kind of a sad name, and if you look at the building, it's in kind of sad shape, but if you look a little more closely, or maybe even listen a little more closely, you'll see that it is an active construction site. Literally, as we speak, it's being stabilized. But we're getting 150 years ahead of ourselves. Let's start back in the beginning in 1870 when the building was built. A quick word of thanks, though, to the City and State Heritage Areas programs for providing funding for the research that went into this. So thank you so much. But 1870, the building was built by a group that also was called the Home of the Friendless. 10 years before, it had built a almost identical building next door, also called the Home of the Friendless, a little confusing. That building was for girls, girl orphans. This building was for boys. Baltimore back then was in an orphanage building spree. Between the years of the Revolutionary War and the Civil War, we built no fewer than 12 orphanages. There was a Catholic orphanage around the corner. Further west in Baltimore was the Baltimore Hebrew Orphan Asylum. We were joining cities around the country and around the world, maybe with London at the sort of epicenter of building orphanages in response to industrialization. Our new industrial world was leaving lots of kids in really dire circumstances that authors like Charles Dickens were helping bring to public light. So we built a bunch of orphanages. The group that started this orphanage was founded in 1854 on a street called Buren Street, but by 1860 they had such a need they bought a parcel and built a bigger building, the one that no longer exists here, and their charter says that they were, quote, a home of the friendless vacant girls. That was their mission. The girls that they served were kind of 2 or 3 different varieties. There were girls whose parents were, quote, vicious and utterly destitute. Those girls called this place home. They slept here and spent their days here. Girls of parents who were, quote, virtuous and industrious, but poor, could come here for 1 square meal a day and occasionally to get new clothes. And it also acted as a daycare center for working mothers. Maybe they would work in a cannery or maybe as a domestic, but they could drop their kids off here in the morning and then pick them up at the end of their shift. And again, the buildings were not just for orphans. The charter says that the Home of the Friendless was for destitute girls, either orphans, half orphans, or abandoned by their parents. And I think half orphans meant that you lost one parent, usually probably a father, leaving you with a working mother. The building behind me served about 200 boys a year. It was the boys' orphanage. And if you're wondering who the architect was, we really don't know. It probably didn't have an architect. The next door building for girls that's no longer here was designed by an architect named Joseph Kemp. I think Joseph was his first name. He also helped design Camden Station downtown at Camden Yards. But he had died by 1870, and we think that the builder, the guy who built this building, a gentleman named William Ortwine, who built the other building as well, just borrowed the plans and maybe made a few tweaks. When the building was built, it served only white boys. This building in 1870 was predominantly, maybe exclusively, all white. By the early 1900s, the demographics were changing quickly. The educator and author Booker T. Washington, in his 1909 book, The Story of the Negro, pointed out Druid Hill Avenue here as a place where there were a large number of homes that were owned by black Baltimore families. A really good start there. But the Home of the Friendless did not like that. They did not like the changing demographics. And in the 1920s, they put the buildings up for sale. In their words, they no longer wanted to be part of an undesirable neighborhood. Clearly, race was at the center of that decision. In 1931, they sold the building here. The WPA, Works Progress Administration, purchased it, the federal government. In the late 1930s, the city purchased it and put in a health clinic. The health department was here. The building changed names. It went from the home of the Friendless to what was called the Druid Hill Health Center, and that was a pretty big deal. The city had city-run health centers in other neighborhoods, white neighborhoods. This was the first time there was a city health clinic in a black neighborhood, a great need being filled there. The health clinic lasted until 1961 when it moved out and the city's housing department moved in, and stayed here until 1992 when it moved out and left the building vacant. And the building has been vacant ever since, but today, again, it is actively being stabilized for a bright future. And I will conclude by saying just around the corner, another building, the Juanita Mitchell and Clarence Mitchell Law Office, is currently being worked on by the beloved Community Services Corporation, which is also working on PS 103, Thurgood Marshall's primary school just around the block. And the Lily Carroll Jackson Civil Rights Museum is up and running just a block away. So there is much needed redevelopment and reinvestment finally happening here, including, I am thrilled to say, this 150-year-old building that for generations took care of destitute children and provided health services to neighbors. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.